Golf Central on YouTube is brought to you by the new Apex irons from Callaway.
Time now for a Golf Today roundtable. Great to see you. Now, Ryan, there are 6 President's Cup members in the field in Napa, also 5 captains or vice captains. What player, in your mind, needs to have a big week in wine country?
Tim, I think the only answer is Max Homa here. He was the most controversial pick for the U.S. President's Cup team. It seemed, if you listen to Captain Jim Furyk, that Max was picked more for his passion and his past performance in these Cup teams as opposed to his current form. And I think of particular importance this week in Napa is going to be Max Homa's driving. He just finished the season on the PGA Tour, in which he was ranked 154th strokes gained off the tee. You never see an elite player with that sort of deficiency, particularly off the tee. He's neither particularly long nor particularly accurate. Silverado is obviously going to be a golf course that places a premium on driving accuracy, as is Royal Montreal, which is host site of the President's Cup. So that is something to pay attention to this week with Max Homa, his driving in particular.
Rex, speaking of big weeks, ESPN reported this morning that a series of meetings, several days worth of meetings, will begin today in New York between the PGA Tour and the Saudi Arabian Public Investment Fund, which might suggest some progress towards the deal that they've been working on. But the optics here are interesting. It's safe to say that meeting officials of the Saudi Arabian government in New York City on September 11th isn't exactly getting a warm reception, is it?
It is not, and the timing is terrible, and you don't know what goes into the complexities of trying to schedule one of these meetings with all of these executives who probably have a lot going on. I totally understand that, but there's no excuse for the timing of this particular meeting. 9/11 Justice Group just issued a statement earlier today pointing out it's the 23rd anniversary of those attacks, and that group called the meeting disgusting, unacceptable, and incredibly painful. Look, these could have happened anytime, and again, I don't pretend to understand the scheduling of all of these executives, but it certainly isn't a good look.
Ryan, how about the FedEx Cup Fall? It's the first incarnation of this new part of the schedule. How would you equate success of the FedEx Cup Fall in your mind?
Look, I think the PGA Tour is going all in on its calendar year schedule, and that is going to be particularly from January until August. And this is sort of other opportunities for the playing members of the PGA Tour. Keep in mind, the modus operandi for the PGA Tour for decades was providing playing opportunities for its membership. That's exactly what they're doing during the fall. The viewership numbers are probably not going to be great. Fan interest is probably not going to be great. There's other things to occupy sports fans' time. But I do think that there is sort of some importance to this schedule, whether it's players trying to get their first win. I think of like a Maverick McNeely, who had a great 2024, didn't quite get over the line. Or it's a player who's trying to secure his status for next season, whether it's a popular player like Joel Damon, who finds himself top 125 bubble with these 8 or 9 events in the PGA Tour Fall to kind of secure that. So I think there's certainly carrots that are dangling for players of a certain caliber. Again, you're probably not going to see the superstars. The PGA Tour understands that. It has not been marketing heavily this fall campaign as much watch TV, but I think if you're a golf sicko, like all 4 of us are on this roundtable, there's certainly something to keep us intrigued for the next couple of months.
Rex, last week Jim Furyk made his captain's picks for the President's Cup. He specifically said he was going to relieve Keegan Bradley of the backroom duties as assistant captain so he could focus on being a player since he's a captain's pick. Is there an argument that he shouldn't do that? That typically this isn't generally a close contest, and that the value Keegan Bradley could get from backroom experience is a lot more useful a year from now at Bethpage Black in the Ryder Cup than his point might prove to be in the President's Cup itself. Should the President's Cup be an incubator for the Ryder Cup in your mind?
I think not officially, because the PGA Tour never wants to hear that and they don't want to see that. But I think you have a very valid point. Look, Tiger Woods was the playing captain back in 2019. The United States won easily. He played well. It didn't seem to be a problem for him, so I'm not quite sure why it would be a problem for Keegan Bradley if he has a walkie-talkie and a golf cart, as well as some playing duties. I understand where Jim Furyk is coming from. He wants the players to focus on playing, and he and the rest of the vice captains can worry about all of the other things. But I think you're right. There's something probably to be learned by being on that side of the equation, where you have Keegan. He's part of these meetings. He starts to understand how fast things come at you. I had a conversation with Jim Furyk about this at Eastlake during the Tour Championship. The idea that it takes months the build up to when you finally get to the point where you make the captain's picks. And then once you actually get to the venue, things happen really fast. And that's usually when you start making mistakes and make decisions that aren't quite sound. For Keegan Bradley to get a taste of that, yeah, I think it'd be very good for him.
Speaking of team events, Solheim Cup begins on Friday. Wonderful event. I feel like every year toward the end of the calendar, we see a mixed team event like the Grant Thornton, and we hear Denny McCarthy raving about a Nelly Korda. Is there room on the golf calendar for a mixed team event outside of December, maybe in the fall or maybe in the summer, where more eyeballs are on the best players in the world on both big tours?
Yeah, Damon, I think that's the most important part here is that the tours, the PGA Tour and the LPGA, need to get together to come up with timing that works best for this event. It has to be sort of in this September window. That's why the President's Cup is now. That's why the Ryder Cup is now. You need to build towards it throughout the year, gain some momentum, gain some fan interest. You can't surround this mixed team event, this hypothetical mixed team event, with other big events because selfishly, the top players on both tours are going to be looking to get their games ready for that event as opposed to this mixed team event. The Zurich Classic, the timing of that doesn't work as well as in the spring. The Grant Thornton doesn't gain much traction in December either. I'd love to see it, and I do think that there's probably a conversation worth having that if this President's Cup becomes yet another blowout and the U.S. wins again, as it has done every time since 1998, whether this tournament needs to be reimagined. To me, a mixed team event is the easiest solution to that, and throw it in September in non-Solheim Cup years.
Speaking of the Solheim Cup, Ryan, there was an interesting moment at last year's when Lexi hit an ill-timed shank on the 18th hole. She didn't want to address it when asked about it in the press conference afterwards. That wasn't all that surprising. What was surprising was the captain, Stacey Lewis, was overheard muttering that it was a terrible question, which it wasn't in any respect a terrible question. Do you think that was one of those moments we're likely to see repeated this year, or do you think there's now an awareness for Stacey or others that the press aren't actually there to cheerlead and the questions have to be asked about shots like that at unfortunate moments?
Well, I certainly hope it was a learning experience for both player and captain. You know, Lexi could have easily explained away what was a very difficult shot or even used that as an opportunity to have sort of a self-deprecating moment. Instead, it became a very tense exchange with reporter Alex Maselli. As it relates to Stacey Lewis, the captain, she showed some pretty thin skin, bristling at what was a pretty basic line of questioning about what was a pivotal moment in that match. I always think, guys, about the format of these press conferences and having either team press conferences or press conferences where you're surrounded by 3 or 4 other players is never ideal. I think it's always easy to get defensive or self-conscious in those types of formats when it feels like you're being attacked. And so I think that's largely to blame here. I do believe if Stacey Lewis had an individual press conference afterward and she was asked about what was sort of the impact of that Lexi shank and what was a pretty pivotal moment in that match has really swung the momentum, I think she would have given a vastly different answer to, again, what was a pretty benign question.
Rex and Laugh, thanks so much for joining us on this roundtable.